Hi, my name is Angela and I'm with Schooling with Grace, and you are at the workshop, Tips and Tricks for Beginning and Struggling Readers. If you are just beginning to teach your student to read, or maybe you are struggling in that area, then you are at the right place. Today, we're going to walk through resources and some tips to help you develop your students into strong readers. We're going to start today off with just a picture of my family because one, I love them. And two, that little darling in the middle is the reason for this workshop. It is the reason I begin to have to think outside the box when it comes to teaching a learner who is struggling. Now, this is an old picture of our family. We have that darling right there on the top right is already graduated high school, but you know, it's really hard to get a family picture these days. So this is what you get. Okay. So today's workshop agenda is the importance of a relationship. We're going to discuss that and why that is relevant to teaching your student how to read, tips and tricks with the fundamentals, and I'm going to give you some resources and helpful ways to assess your students' reading. We're going to start off with relationships. So the most important aspect of teaching your child to read is the relationship that you have with them. Now, I want to say that again because it is super important that if you do not have a good working relationship with your child where they feel safe and secure with you, then teaching them to read is going to be really, really hard. So what they need to know from you is that they can feel safe to make mistakes, safe to stumble through words, and to repeatedly not get things right when they are learning to read. They need to know that you're not going to be upset or angry with them. They need to feel safe because they're not going to take risk if they're not safe, if they're not feeling safe. And I know that that seems like a silly thing to bring up, especially in the homeschooling world. Like, why would your kid not feel safe? But I know for myself that on days when I'm tired or I'm frustrated with other things going on, that when I was sitting down to read with my daughter, I was not always in the best place. And so some of her the times that she would fumble over and over things or just not get them would start to frustrate me, and then she would start to withdraw. So taking upon that experience, I really understand that how important it is to create a safe and secure environment with your child as you're starting to teach them how to read, or even teach them any new concept that they might be struggling with. We want them to feel good about that time that you are teaching them to read. We want them to look forward to it, to not necessarily think of it as some sort of drudgery that they have to get through, but we want them to treasure that time. And the only way that we can do that is to create a calm and welcoming space and time with them as you are starting this. I know for us, we would always call it our special time. Like we would have a little special area of the house that we would sit in when we were doing our reading lessons. I would do things like have like light music playing sometimes, or I would have snacks and drinks available to hers, just something that would make her feel like this is a special time between me and mommy. And then I would always ask her to stick her thinking cap on, and then I would ask her really, really hard questions, you know, like, what's your dog's name? And things like that, just to tease her and to ask her whether or not her thinking cap was working before we really delve into the hard subject of teaching her to read. You want to make sure that your time with your child is spent in close proximity. We don't want them to be sitting across the room or even across the table, because we want them to think of that time as a loving time with warm, fuzzy feelings, especially if you have a child that is struggling to read. Now, if you're just teaching them to read and things are going well, then all of those things are just bonuses to teaching your child to read. But If you are struggling and there's already some heightened frustration between the two of you, then these are things that you really should consider. And if you want this time to feel natural and unstressed, and you want them to have good feelings, then throughout it, just make sure that you're doing a lot of praising and letting them know how much this time means to you as well as to them, and that you are excited about the prospect of getting to teach them to read. Whatever you can do to instill that warm, fuzzy, good relationship feeling between the two of you as you are beginning to read, that is what you need to be shooting for. Sometimes I would just start off with a picture book at the beginning of the lesson just to be like, hey, come sit down with me. I found this great book and I think that you're really going to love it. And then we would start reading it, and I could kind of sneak in some comprehension questions, or what do you think that person is doing in there? Or did you see, what is this picture showing you that's going to happen next in the story? Or maybe you'd even get to sneak in some vocabulary words in it. But whatever you're doing, remember that the relationship between you and your child is the most important thing that you need to work on as you're teaching them to read. Now, moving on to reading is fundamental. And I just wanted to be able to say that if you're a child of the 80s, you probably came across that phrase. But it is, these steps are what's fundamental to teaching your child to read. So we're not going to bore you with each of these steps going through, because we're going to go through them with examples, but these are the important foundational elements of teaching your child to read: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. Most of you probably are doing a program or have a curriculum that is going to cover each one of these areas, and not all of them cover them well. Most of them do have gaps in them because they're counting on you to sort of supplement and fill in those areas that your child is going to need more work in. This is actually why I created my Raising Readers curriculum for my daughter, because some of the curriculum that we were using just moved through it too quickly, and I really needed her to have more time, especially with these first two things, since she was struggling so much. In the past, we've used 100 reading, or 100 Easy Lessons. It's one of my favorite books to read. It's no frills, but we move through it quite easily. I know with my oldest three, who teaching them to read was so much easier as we were learning to read with them. Like, I felt like I was just like the world's best teacher, because we didn't even have to finish that first book with them before they were off reading on their own. But it wasn't until my youngest came along that I realized that, probably didn't have much to do with me at all. So maybe you're using a curriculum like that, or maybe you are using All About Reading or Phonetic Zoo or Sing Spell Write. Those are all great programs to get started with teaching your child to read. But remember that no matter what program that you choose to use, it's going to be more important that in how you're choosing to use the program, and not just what program it is you're using. So regardless of whatever program you're using with your children, let's talk about ways that you can help them in each of these areas. So phonemic awareness. All that means is the ability to hear, identify, and play with sounds. So to hear or see the letter A and know that the letter A says ah, B says buh, that is what phonemic awareness really is. According to the National Reading Panel, the amount of phonemic awareness that a child has been exposed to before they start school is a strong factor in how well that child will read by the end of first grade. That's because phonemic awareness typically comes pretty naturally to English learners, and probably of all kids in their own language. But they are hearing those, they're singing the ABCs, they're seeing letters. You naturally point things out to them as they're growing up. When naturally, it's what we do with our children. I knew for my own particular daughter that she was not ready to begin learning to read when I would hold up flashcards and we would be talking and I would say, hold up the letter A, and I'd say, what letter is this? And she'd go very excitedly, C, and I would try again, and it would be a new letter, and the y'all, she was hard. So for most kids, it comes naturally. For mine, it did not. And that's what brings us to this workshop today. So one of the videos that I'm going to share with you, just a quick clip of ways that you can help determine whether your child has learned their phonemic awareness or got that skill down, is to start with just mixing up some letters. You don't want to have them go in order because they've memorized their ABCs, most of them have. And so to determine whether or not they really get it, you might just do something like this, where you're just asking them to identify letters out of order. So today we're going to look at these letters and we're going to try to figure out what letters you know and what letters you still need to practice. We're going to read down this row right here. Can you tell me what letters you see? Keep going. What letter is that? S. L. So you can see that here she was 6 at this age and she was still struggling with identifying her letters out of order. And so I knew at this point that we were not ready to move on to the next stage. We needed to spend more time here on the phonemic awareness part. So another activity that you can do to determine whether or not they have down this skill is something along this line, where you are going to have them match up pictures or objects with their letter sounds. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on this video, but I'll give you a quick glimpse. This is an extra challenge for you. So we were just practicing our letter sounds. And now what I want you to do is to take these letters, and not all of them. We're only going to do a few of them just to practice. So we're going to take the letters. Let's say them first. Okay. I have a bucket full of different things here. Each of these things in this bucket have the sound at the beginning of it, of one of these letters. So the letter A, what sound does A make? You can find something in this bucket that starts with the sound. Okay. All right. So those two are just examples of ways that you can determine whether or not your student is ready to move on to phonics. So phonics instruction is the next step after phonemic awareness, and it teaches children that the specific sounds belong to specific letters and patterns. Once they're able to figure that out, they'll be able to have better comprehension and increased fluency in their reading. Because if your child is spending all their time trying to decode words, by the time that they get to the end of the page, they're not going to remember what they read. Being able to decode words is a really important part of reading, because you don't want them to be struggling through as they're trying to read a page going they need to be able to understand that all of those sounds together make a word. So some of the ways that you can do this is to practice sensical and nonsensical words and see if they can say them. You're going to definitely want to be practicing rhyming words and changing the endings of the word families. This is an example of something that we have done. We've done it with lots of different letters and words, but we call this the magic letters with popsicle sticks. So I just print it off a sheet, and then they take that popsicle stick and they go through and they say all the words, and then they put that stick back, they grab another popsicle stick and they go through and they say all the words. And that is just a quick and easy fun activity that is not just all paper and pencil. Also just making sure that they're having lots of opportunities with rhyming. This is a rhyming puzzle that we practice many times to help them kind of get down those word patterns. These are all really quick and easy things that you can do that are not just sitting down and paper and pencil. So after you've taught the lesson, then make sure that you're enhancing it with activities that are fun and engaging for them. The next step is the fluency, the ability to read text accurately and quickly. So they need to be able to read. Fluency includes reading consistently with speed and accuracy and proper expression. We don't want them just to be reading monotone, like we want them to get the punctuation down, what it sounds like when there's an exclamation point, what it sounds like when there is a period or a question mark. All of that is part of fluency. Fluency is achieved when they no longer are focusing on the how to read. So you can teach your child fluency by teaching them sight words, giving them reading material that is appropriate to their skill level, and continually giving them engaging activities so that they're keeping up with those skills. Once they're confident with their reading material, then they're going to take more risk in their reading. They're going to ask for harder books. They're going to volunteer to read out loud. Once they have this aspect down, then it's very easy to move on to the rest of it. Here's just one activity that I would do with my kids to teach them sight words or working on fluency. And this is me just taking a children's book. I think this one is Cat in the Hat, or I don't really remember which one this was, but taking a children's book and then pulling out sight words from that children's book and having them listen for them and point to them. Having more parts of their body working in a lesson is always good to engage as much as possible.
Words for the story. One fish, two fish,
one fish.
Blue fish.
Here we go.
Okay, can you say your sight words for me? That word is no. Very good. So whenever you hear one of those sight words as I read it, I want you to point to them, okay? You ready? So you got to listen very carefully. We're not going to read the whole story. We're just going to read a few pages of this book. I want to hear how well, I want to see how well you can listen. Ready? One fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. See a sight word there? Good. Black fish.
Okay. And then I took that book and I wrote out the first, I think, 2 or 3 pages of it, or I typed it out. And then I had him match that up by highlighting the words that we were working on as part of our sight words. So these are just easy ways. One of the other fun activities that we would do is the sight word hunt, to where we would have these sight words. I have this activity on my website where we would hide the sight words around the house and they would have to go find them in whatever color, like in this picture down there at the bottom, the word is there. And he has to highlight the word there on the paper in the same color that was on the card. And he would just go around the house and he would go on a sight word hunt. And that was fun and engaging and would help just familiarize them more with their sight words. And there's so many different activities out there to help them practice fluency that you can just find whatever is going to keep your kids' interest and go with that. All right, vocabulary. The next 2 of these, vocabulary and reading comprehension, they kind of go hand in hand, but we're going to break them up here because that is easier to do. But vocabulary are the words that kids need to know to communicate effectively. I don't think I have to explain that much further than that. But the largest influence of students' vocabulary is the sheer volume of reading they do, especially the wide reading that includes a rich variety of text. So about a year ago, I came across an article that basically said that there are two indicators of children having large vocabulary. One is the education of the parents in their home. And that's because the more education that they have, the more likely they are to use higher vocabulary. And two, how many books are found in their home. So basically it was saying that the more your children hear you speak at higher level vocabulary words, and if they read a lot of books, they will have the proclivity to internalize and use the vocabulary that they have learned. Like how I just threw in that word proclivity right there. So one way to increase reading vocabulary is to have your students read a wide variety of both fiction and nonfiction books. When they are reading the books, make sure that you're pointing out words that they don't understand, maybe circling those words if it's like in a reader, or writing them down. Use context clues, like ask them if they come across a word that they don't understand, ask them to read the words around it. Look at the picture, like what could that word possibly mean? Doing that with both fiction and nonfiction books is going to expand their vocabulary. It's not the best practice to teach vocabulary words out of context, but it is something that you can do in addition to teaching them in context. You can use something like a vocabulary map like this. This is something that I use with my older kids, but if I was going to use it with my younger ones, I would stick to just a vocabulary word, the definition, and the picture. And I would just have one piece of paper where I had them write the vocabulary word on the top, maybe draw a picture and have the definition at the bottom, but something that is going to get them to put that word in their mind and give them a reason to use it. We also love this game. You can find this on my website called Word Wizard. This is a game that we still use this game even with my high schoolers because it's a fun game to use. To play it, you're going to pick a vocabulary word, like over here to the left, you see that word abhor, and you're going to write the definition of it down. And the job of the players is, so we would write our names down at the bottom in the players list. And the job is to see how many times you can use that word in a day or in a week or for however long you're practicing that word without it being noticed. So my daughter would often, that's one of her favorite words from this game really, is she would sit down and I abhor this broccoli. And she would say things like that. And if somebody caught her like, oh, you used the word, then she doesn't get a point. But if she's able to use it naturally and nobody calls her on it, then she gets to have a point. And the idea is whoever gets the most point at the end of the time period wins the game. So you're teaching them how to use that word naturally and in natural situations so that it becomes just a part of their everyday vocabulary. So fun activity, love it. We've done it for years. Okay, moving on to reading comprehension. And the last thing that we're going to talk about as far as those fundamentals is the ability to understand and get meaning from what has been read. Comprehension basically just refers to a child's understanding of what they are reading. So if you're looking for some tips on increasing reading comprehension, the first thing you're going to do is choose age and level appropriate books. We like to use the 5-finger method, which is just have your child grab a book that they are interested in reading, hold up 5 fingers, and as they're reading that book, if they miss a word, they're going to put down a finger. If they get to 5, that book is too hard for them to read and they have to pick another book. So that's one way to help them increase their reading vocabulary or reading comprehension, is just to choose books that are age appropriate and level appropriate. Have your children read out loud using a device like this fancy device, which is just a PVC pipe. It's called a whisper phone, or at least that's what we called it when I was teaching. And all it does is they read into that phone, and at the same time that they're speaking, they're hearing, and it just kind of gives one more level to them understanding what is happening. It's going back into their brain. Retell the story using props. We've made so many little videos with Legos about stories when our kids were younger, and have them do puppets, have them, whatever it is, dress up and recreate the story. Ask questions while they're reading. Who are the main characters? What is happening? What is the problem in the story that the characters have to solve or deal with? How does he or she feel about that? Where are the characters? Just getting them talking about whatever they're reading is going to help them with that reading comprehension. Okay, so we've made it through all of the fundamentals of reading, and I just wanted to share with you some resources that we have used. I've covered some of them already, but that have been big helps to us in our reading journey. We've got the 100 Easy Lessons, the All About Reading. I love the All About Reading. I think that the program is fantastic. If you have the opportunity to check it out, I would definitely start with those top two first things. If you have a child who is struggling, or you just want something that is more fun and engaging and active, then that Raising Readers curriculum that I created for the phonemic awareness and phonics levels would be a great place to start. If you need some supplements, Bob books, love the Bob books. That's what you were just seeing my daughter read back in this right here. They're just easy, quick win stories to teach very specific phonics skills. Explode the Code. If you are working on phonics and you actually do want some paper and pencil activities, then that Explode the Code series is going to be a great option for you. Starfall and Reading Eggs are online. Both of those, Starfall is really meant more for that phonemic awareness and phonics stage. Although they do have some activities that kind of reach you through other some of the other fundamentals, but your kids are going to probably find the most success in that stage. Reading Eggs covers it all. So if you wanted an online supplemental program, I wouldn't call that your main reading program, but if you're looking for a supplement, then that definitely is a great option for you. Okay, so thanks for sticking with me so far. I hope that I was able to offer you some understanding about some of those levels, some resources, and some tips to help your child develop into a stronger reader. If you have any questions, you can find me at schoolingwithgrace.com, on Facebook, or I'm even dabble on Instagram on occasion where I pretend to know what I'm doing, but I would be happy to answer any questions or to connect with you there. Thank you.